The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the penthouse kitchen as Vanessa Blake stood barefoot on the cool marble floor, carefully slicing strawberries into delicate halves. Outside, Manhattan's skyline bathed in soft morning light, and her reflection in the tall glass windows looked like a woman who had everything: a flawless marriage, a beautiful home, and a business empire rising like a skyscraper in the financial district. But as she stirred sugar into her coffee with slow, deliberate movements, her eyes, sharp and quietly calculating, watched the steam rise with a heaviness that belied her graceful exterior. She placed the fruit beside a folded linen napkin and carried the tray into Ethan's study, where he sat reviewing something on his tablet, shirt collar open, hair slightly tousled in the way that made the public adore his image. He looked up and smiled the same smile that once made her knees weak. "You're spoiling me again," he teased, tapping the corner of the tablet. She returned the smile. "Someone has to remind you that you're human and need food. You forget that sometimes." Ethan chuckled, leaning over to kiss her cheek. "That's why I have you. My reminder, my brain, my better half." Vanessa didn't respond. She set the tray down, adjusted a paper on his desk, and turned to leave. Back when they started, it had been different. Sleepless nights in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, brainstorming product names while eating instant noodles, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, their only background music. Ethan had passion. She had precision. He had dreams. She had discipline. Together, they turned his little software idea into a company with offices in 3 countries. Ethan charmed investors. Vanessa closed deals. She never cared about applause. She didn't need the articles or the awards. Her satisfaction came from watching Ethan's eyes light up when a plan worked, when profits doubled, when they moved into this apartment. She loved him the way builders love blueprints, quietly, methodically, without fanfare. But now the air between them was different. He came home later than usual, always with an excuse. The trips were longer. His texts grew shorter. He stopped asking her opinion on expansion strategies. Meetings that once ended with Ethan saying, "Van, what do you think?" became meetings she wasn't even invited to. She didn't jump to conclusions. Vanessa Blake was not impulsive. She watched, listened, and recorded the subtle shift in patterns. She noticed how he lingered on his phone, the unfamiliar laugh that came too easily, the scent of new cologne she hadn't bought him. Still, she made breakfast. Still, she wore his favorite silk robe. Still, she offered quiet advice during dinner about a potential merger that could save the company millions. Ethan thanked her with distracted affection, his mind elsewhere. Her instincts whispered louder each day, but she tucked those whispers behind a composed smile and poured another glass of wine. She could have asked. She could have accused. But Vanessa knew better than to confront a lie without evidence. Instead, she went back to the office, her office, though few acknowledged it. She reviewed contracts, updated her name on quiet documents, and reestablished ties with clients who had always respected her more than they respected Ethan. That night, as she stood on the balcony alone, city lights twinkling like a silent symphony, she whispered to the wind, "If the spotlight blinds him, let him enjoy the stage. I built it. I can take it apart." She wasn't bitter. She was patient, and she knew, whatever Ethan was doing, whoever was making him laugh behind that screen, he'd forgotten one thing. She wasn't just the woman beside the throne. She was the throne. The Blake Tech annual gala shimmered with gold accents and champagne bubbles, held in a grand ballroom carved out of old wealth and new money. Crystal chandeliers glittered above and waiters moved like clockwork, balancing trays of oysters and foie gras. It was a night to celebrate the company's success, a success built by Vanessa's strategies and Ethan's charisma. Vanessa moved through the crowd like silk, greeting board members, nodding at department heads, charming journalists with practiced ease. Her floor-length navy gown hugged her form modestly, her makeup soft but precise. Everything about her spoke elegance, control, and subtle power. But then she saw her. Red heels, perfectly arched, clicking across marble like a deliberate beat of arrogance. A figure far too young to be on the guest list alone. A red cocktail dress that hugged too tightly for a corporate setting. And that laugh, sweet, high, rehearsed, punctuating Ethan's sentence like a period that didn't belong. Vanessa's eyes didn't narrow. Her lips didn't twitch. She simply watched. Harper Vance. 23. Intern, marketing department. Vanessa remembered approving her application. Bright resume. Too bright, perhaps. Vanessa recalled thinking the girl was ambitious. Now she realized she had underestimated how quickly ambition could be weaponized. Ethan stood beside Harper, a hand casually tucked into his trouser pocket, grinning. He wasn't touching her, but the distance between them was closer than professionalism allowed. Too close. Too comfortable. Harper tilted her head up at him like a question that begged an answer only he could give. Vanessa stepped closer, smile in place. "Ethan," she said warmly, her voice like velvet over steel, "introduce me to your protege." Ethan blinked, surprised, then smiled too wide. "Of course, Vanessa. This is Harper. Harper, my wife." Harper turned, her expression eager but practiced. "Mrs. Blake, it's such an honor. I've read so much about you in the early days of the company. You were like the original architect behind the brand, right?" Vanessa extended her hand. "That's generous of you, but I prefer to let others take the credit." She held Harper's hand for a second longer than necessary, then let go, still smiling. Her eyes dipped, red nails, designer clutch, and a gold necklace she recognized from a collection Ethan once gifted her. It was subtle, but Vanessa noticed everything. "So how are you finding Blake Tech?" Vanessa asked, her tone smooth. "Oh, it's amazing. I feel like I'm learning so much. Mr. Blake's vision is so inspiring." Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "Yes, he does have a gift for making things sound better than they are." Harper blinked, unsure if it was a compliment. Ethan let out a quick laugh, diffusing the tension. "Vanessa always keeps me grounded. She has a way with words." "I suppose that's what keeps you balanced," Harper replied, lifting her glass. "Exactly," Vanessa said, her eyes fixed. "Without balance, things fall." A nearby executive called Ethan's name, giving him an excuse to step away. Vanessa and Harper were briefly left alone. The music swelled. The clinking of glasses masked the silence between them. "You know," Vanessa said, voice quiet, "I used to wear red heels like that." Harper tilted her head. "Really?" "Yes," Vanessa continued, her gaze calm. "But I realized I didn't need to draw attention to my feet when I already knew where I was going." Harper opened her mouth, then closed it. Vanessa's tone had no malice, but something in it settled cold in the air. Ethan returned, arm brushing Harper's as he took her empty glass. "Everything all right here?" Vanessa met his eyes and gave a soft nod. "Perfect." The rest of the evening played out like a stage drama, where everyone performed roles, but only Vanessa could hear the creak of the floorboards beneath. The conversations, the smiles, the laughter, none of it mattered. She saw the glances Harper gave Ethan. She saw the way Ethan responded with too much warmth. By midnight, the gala ended with applause and toasts. Vanessa clapped with everyone else, standing beside her husband, the man the world admired. But inside, she was already shifting. In her mind, files were being opened, timelines reviewed, digital footprints followed. Vanessa didn't accuse, she observed. The thread had tightened, not enough to snap, but enough to leave a mark. The days that followed the gala unfolded with eerie clarity. Vanessa woke up each morning before Ethan, her eyes already open before the alarm buzzed. She cooked breakfast like always, perfectly scrambled eggs, toast just browned, fresh juice in crystal glasses. Ethan often didn't touch it. He rushed through mornings now, with half-hearted kisses and mumbled apologies about early meetings or traffic. He no longer asked about her plans. He rarely even looked her in the eye. Vanessa didn't ask where he was going. She simply watched. In the evening, he returned later than usual, sometimes midnight, sometimes not at all. His excuses were a rotating playlist, product launches, networking events, team dinners. Vanessa knew every corner of the business. She could count exactly how many events were happening in any given week, and she knew which ones didn't require interns. She began documenting everything, not because she needed the drama, but because she needed the truth, cold and unshakable. She made it methodical, precise, just like the financial plans she'd once drafted that saved Ethan's company from collapse. His call logs? She didn't check them directly. She noted how his phone always buzzed at odd hours, followed by him stepping out with a smile. She recognized Harper's voice once, accidentally unmuted on a Bluetooth speaker. Vanessa was in the hallway when she heard it. Just a few words. "You didn't forget me, did you?" Light, teasing, careless. Ethan chuckled. Vanessa kept walking past the door as if nothing reached her ears. She hired a third-party data expert, someone who once owed her a favor after she helped him win a fraud case against a major corporation. Within days, she had access to the backup emails Ethan thought he deleted, reservations for dinners he never mentioned, a transfer of company funds labeled as a consulting bonus sent directly to Harper's private account. There were photos, too. A blurred image at first, Ethan's arm wrapped around a slim figure in red, standing too close outside a bar. Another showed them entering a hotel 2 cities away on a supposed business trip. None of them were shocking. In fact, they were almost anticlimactic. Vanessa saved each file to a discreet drive. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She didn't even delete them. She labeled each folder by date. She reviewed them like case files. But the flashbacks hurt. She remembered the time Ethan had run into her office, wide-eyed with excitement, after securing their first investor. He had lifted her off her chair, spun her around, and kissed her forehead. "We did it," he had whispered. "We're going to change the world." She remembered the anniversary dinner where he recited lines from her favorite novel because he had taken the time to memorize them. She remembered how they used to hold hands under the table during board meetings, sharing silent reassurance. And now, he couldn't even remember if she had a meeting scheduled on the same day as their anniversary. Vanessa sat by the window one night with a cup of tea, her legs tucked beneath her. The city lights blinked in the distance like indifferent stars. She closed her eyes and let the ache settle, like dust, soft but everywhere. She didn't ask Ethan about Harper. She didn't demand explanations. She let him lie. She let him twist deeper into a web he didn't know she was mapping. He thought he was hiding something behind a closed door, unaware she had built the walls and the locks years ago. One evening, as he entered the apartment late, Vanessa greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and a calm question. "How was your dinner with the client in Tribeca?" He paused, half a second too long. "Good," he said. "Long. We had a lot to go over." She smiled and poured him a drink. "Sounds exhausting." Then she walked away, glass in hand, the corners of her lips barely curved. She didn't need his confession. She didn't need him to fall to his knees. She had everything she needed. Proof doesn't need to scream. It simply waits for the perfect moment to speak. Long before the spotlight found Ethan Blake, before Blake Tech's name adorned glossy covers and its logo flickered across digital billboards, there had been only cluttered desks, cheap coffee, and 2 people who believed in each other. Vanessa remembered those days like still photographs. They weren't glamorous, but they were real. In those early years, Ethan was the dreamer, and Vanessa was the anchor. While he sketched visions of the future on napkins, she stayed up cross-checking tax codes and drafting legal structures. Ethan had the charisma to open doors. Vanessa knew how to keep them open. It had started with something simple, the business license. Ethan, too busy pitching ideas and setting up meetings, had casually handed her the application form one night with a smile. "Can you take care of this, babe? You're the one who actually reads the fine print." She did, and she registered the company under her name, not as a power play, but because it made sense. She was the one managing the paperwork, the accounts, the compliance. Ethan had laughed it off. Perfect. If the business ever fails, I'll blame you in court. He didn't know she had kept that joke in the back of her mind like a bookmark. Then came the property. Their first office space had been a tiny sublease in an aging building. Later, when Ethan insisted on buying a larger suite in Midtown to impress investors, it was Vanessa who did the groundwork. She reviewed the deed, met with the real estate attorney, and filed the necessary documents. Ethan, again, passed the paperwork to her without question. "You always know this stuff better than I do," he said. "Besides, it's not like we're going to separate anytime soon." Vanessa had smiled. Of course not. The shares came next. In the early fundraising rounds, Vanessa had recommended retaining a certain percentage of preferred shares in her name to stabilize voting rights. Ethan hadn't blinked. "Whatever you think works," he had said, tossing the signed document onto her desk. "Honestly, I wouldn't have a company if you weren't running it behind me." She remembered that moment clearly, not for its romance, but for its weight. Ethan had meant it as praise, even affection. But to Vanessa, it had been a quiet realization. He didn't see her as a partner. He saw her as a safety net, someone who would always take care of things while he climbed higher. Over the years, more assets fell into place the same way. The vehicles, the luxury apartment, the trademarks. She handled everything with precision, professionalism, and a calm demeanor. Ethan never questioned a single signature. His trust wasn't blind, it was distracted. He thought he was the star of the show. Vanessa let him believe it. Now, in the present, she sat at her desk in the home office, a minimalist space filled with quiet elegance. She opened a file folder labeled Holdings. The papers inside were crisp, neatly clipped, legally airtight. She read the title lines one by one. Property deed, sole owner, Vanessa L. Blake. Corporate shareholder agreement, majority holder, Vanessa L. Blake. Trademark registration, filed by Vanessa Blake. Account access authorization, financial officer, Vanessa L. Blake. None of it had been done out of spite. She hadn't planned a betrayal. She had simply done what Ethan had always expected her to do: take care of things. He had handed her the keys, the contracts, the control, praising her efficiency and her brains, all while soaking up the glory. He called her his genius behind the curtain. She had smiled then. She was still smiling now. Irony didn't need to roar. Sometimes it came dressed in silence and a monogrammed file folder. And beneath every signature Ethan never read, Vanessa had laid the foundation of something indestructible. Not a trap, but a fortress. He had built the empire on her foundation. And now she knew exactly where to strike. It began on a Wednesday, quietly, like most revolutions. Vanessa entered the downtown office of Blake Tech through the back elevator, dressed in a crisp navy suit that mirrored her calm determination. The receptionist greeted her with the usual courtesy, unaware that the woman she was addressing was no longer just the co-founder's wife, but the majority shareholder, the legal director, and the silent executor of a plan long in the making. She started with Mr. Langston, the corporate attorney on retainer. A man who had once chuckled at her attention to legal details now sat straight-backed as she presented him with a stack of files. Copies of shares, transfer authorizations, clauses long buried but still active. He flipped through each page in silence, lips tightening as he read. "You're within full rights," he finally said, tapping the edge of a document. "I assume you want discretion?" "I want precision," Vanessa replied. Silence is just the method. By Friday, contracts were being revised. Employees began receiving subtle memos requesting signature confirmations for updated terms. Nothing screamed change, but the company's internal systems, payroll, HR access, account authorizations were gradually being redirected. Most of them didn't question it. Vanessa had always been the one who fixed things. Next, she spoke to Meera Patel, the firm's CFO. A quiet woman who had always admired Vanessa but rarely had the chance to work directly with her. They met over a closed-door lunch in a private bistro downtown. Vanessa outlined a timeline, showed Meera the chain of asset control, and handed over an encrypted file. Meera studied her carefully, then smiled. "You're not burning the building," she said. "You're rebuilding it without the termites." Vanessa's reply was a simple nod. "I'm not here to punish the company, only the man who forgot who built it." Simultaneously, Vanessa began freezing shared accounts, not with fanfare, but with quiet triggers. Travel cards were suspended. Vendor payments were paused for routine audits. The private jet? Grounded for unscheduled maintenance. Ethan never noticed, or maybe he noticed and thought it was someone else's job to fix. He was busy planning a weekend escape with Harper, a beachfront suite in the Bahamas, chartered under the company's name. Vanessa let him plan it. She even watched him from across the living room, feet kicked up, typing with a grin on his face as he confirmed the itinerary on his phone. She didn't interrupt. She waited until he left. The morning Ethan boarded the flight, Vanessa stood by the penthouse window, coffee in hand, watching the city breathe beneath her. She could picture him settling into the first-class seat, sipping wine he didn't pay for, smiling at Harper like the world was still his to control. By the time he landed, the company's access codes would be changed. Board members would have received a briefing email under her signature. A new press release, under the radar, would declare an internal restructuring of leadership. It wouldn't make headlines yet, but those who mattered would know. At noon that same day, Vanessa walked into the main office building, no longer using the side entrance. Her heels clicked confidently across the polished marble floor. Employees turned and greeted her with genuine smiles, some even relieved. They had always liked her, trusted her. Now they saw her for what she had always been, the real power behind the name. That afternoon, Mira sent her a confirmation. All major investor relationships had been redirected to her portfolio. Quiet phone calls had been made. Everyone was watching and waiting, but no one resisted. Vanessa had something Ethan never had: certainty, calm, a record of competence. And when Ethan returned 3 days later, laughing and tanned, arms slung around Harper's waist, he walked into a lobby where his name was still on the wall. But the eyes that once respected him now glanced past him. Vanessa met him in the office with a polite smile and a folder in her hand. "Welcome back. We need to talk about your new position." He blinked, confused. "My what?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Your role has changed. As of today, you're stepping down as CEO, for the sake of transparency and investor trust, of course." His voice cracked into a laugh. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious when contracts are involved," she said, setting the folder gently on the desk between them. He opened it. The paper was legal, the signatures were real, and the control was no longer his. Vanessa didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, composed and still, watching the man who had once flown high fall gently, quietly, without noise, without warning, like a throne pulling itself out from under a king who forgot who placed it there. The elevator doors opened with a familiar chime, but the air inside Blake Tech felt colder than Ethan remembered. He stepped into the marble lobby, still holding the handle of his suitcase from the airport. Harper trailed behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf like someone trying to play the part of wealth rather than live it. At first glance, nothing looked wrong. The receptionist smiled politely, but didn't rise. The security guards nodded, but didn't speak. The energy was different, tight, unreadable. Ethan walked toward the executive elevator and tapped his keycard. A red light blinked. He tried again, still red. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning to the receptionist. "My card isn't working." She stood and folded her hands. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake. Your access was revoked yesterday. You'll need to schedule an appointment if you wish to go upstairs." Ethan blinked, stunned. "What do you mean revoked? I'm the CEO." She hesitated, then said, "I believe that's no longer accurate." Before he could respond, a firm hand landed on his shoulder. Marcus from Legal, Vanessa's old ally. "Mr. Blake," he said calmly, "Miss Blake is expecting you at home. She asked that we not make a scene." Ethan's face twisted. What is this, some kind of joke? But Harper had already begun inching away, sensing the shift, her phone in her hand. Her gaze darted between the receptionist and Marcus, unsure whether to stand by Ethan or retreat. Ethan turned to her. "Harper, wait." But she shook her head. "I thought you said everything was under control." He opened his mouth, but no words came. She stared at him for a beat longer, then walked out, heels echoing against the tile, head held high like she hadn't been flying on someone else's dime. By the time Ethan returned to the penthouse, the locks had already been reprogrammed. Only his fingerprints still worked for now. He stepped into the living room to find Vanessa sitting by the window, a porcelain cup of tea in hand, her back straight, posture perfect. The city glowed behind her in the late afternoon light. She didn't rise. She didn't look angry. "Vanessa," he started, his voice raw. "What's going on? What happened at the office? Why is Harper?" "I left you a folder in the study," she said evenly. "I assume you didn't read it." He moved across the room, snatching the envelope from the desk. Inside were divorce papers, financial disclosures, and a timeline of all legal actions taken during his trip. It was surgical, precise, and utterly devastating. He stared at her. "You're divorcing me." She finally looked at him, her eyes calm, unmoved. "I told you everything. You just didn't listen." "I didn't. Van, I didn't think you would actually—" "That's the problem," she cut in gently. "You thought I would wait, that I'd stay quiet forever." He moved closer, panic rising. "We can fix this. You're angry, I get it, but we can figure this out, right? I'll step back in. We'll talk to the board." "There's no board left to talk to," she said, her tone still quiet, almost kind. "They're aligned with me now. You have no shares, no title, no seat." His hands shook. "This is crazy." Vanessa took a slow sip of tea. What's crazy is thinking you could betray the person who built your entire empire and still expect them to make your coffee every morning. Ethan sat down heavily, like the weight of everything finally reached him. "I lost everything," he said under his breath. "No," Vanessa replied, setting her cup down. "You gave it away. One signature at a time, one lie after another. You handed me the throne because you thought I wouldn't use it. You underestimated me, Ethan. That was your first mistake and your last." He looked up, eyes wide, lost. "Is this really the end?" Vanessa rose, walked to the door, and opened it for him. "Yes," she said softly, "and for once I'm the one closing it." Ethan Blake's fall from grace was not a thunderous collapse. It was a slow, suffocating unraveling, like watching thread being pulled from a suit until nothing remained but a pile of expensive fabric with no form. In the days after Vanessa served the papers, Ethan tried to recover his footing. He made calls to former partners, investors, and media friends. Most didn't answer. The few who did were polite, but cold. One even laughed, not unkindly, and said, "You should have treated her better." Everyone knew she was the brain. The media got wind of the leadership shift at Blake Tech faster than Ethan expected. Within a week, headlines read, "Blake Tech enters new era. Vanessa Blake takes helm as CEO." From behind the scenes to center stage, the rise of the woman who built the empire. Ethan Blake steps down amidst corporate restructuring. Vanessa Blake speaks with grace. No scandals. No accusations. Just elegant repositioning. Vanessa didn't smear his name. She didn't need to. Silence made people more curious. Curiosity led to speculation. Speculation turned into public narrative. And in every interview she gave, Vanessa was poised. She thanked Ethan for his contributions. She never once mentioned Harper. Her dignity made people respect her more. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself slowly erased from the world he once ruled. Creditors began calling. Legal notices arrived. Without his CEO title, without access to company accounts, he was forced to sell personal assets just to stay afloat. The penthouse? Already signed over. The luxury car? Leased through the company, now returned. One afternoon, he walked into a cafe he once frequented with Vanessa, only to be greeted with awkward stares. A younger executive he'd mentored glanced up and quickly looked away, pretending not to see him. "Ethan?" the barista asked hesitantly. "Sorry, did you still want the staff discount?" He said nothing, pulled out his wallet, and paid in cash. He spent most days in a service department now, small, sterile, nothing like the world he once knew. He had no assistant, no driver, no one to iron his shirts. Harper had vanished without a word, and even his phone seemed quieter than ever. Across town, Vanessa was preparing for the annual tech conference. It was the first time she'd be delivering the keynote under her own name. Her team worked around the clock, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as someone's wife, but as the strategist she had always been. Her office was bright, filled with fresh flowers and quiet hums of progress. Her portrait was being prepared for a feature in a leading business magazine. But when she looked at it, dressed in soft beige, arms crossed, expression strong, she couldn't help but feel a pinch deep inside her chest. Because betrayal doesn't just live in court papers or balance sheets. It hides in memories, quiet dinners that were really lies, anniversaries celebrated under pretense, phone calls with laughter that now felt like echoes from a stranger. At night, she still reached for the left side of the bed, only to find it cold. She still paused at the closet where his suits used to hang. Sometimes, she thought about the little notes he used to leave on her desk. "You're the reason we're winning." And she wondered, had he meant it then, or had he just been clever enough to say it? She didn't cry. She didn't hate. She moved forward. But moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant walking with the pain until it grew quiet enough to stop screaming. The price of arrogance was steep. Ethan lost everything he thought couldn't be taken. But the price of love betrayed, that left marks where no one else could see. The mornings were the quietest. Before the world knocked, before the meetings began, Vanessa sat by the tall windows of her new apartment, a space smaller than the penthouse, but warmer, lighter, her own. The sunlight fell across the pages of her journal, where words didn't need to impress anyone. Here, she wrote truths she never said aloud. She didn't miss Ethan's voice. She missed the version of herself who once believed in him without doubt. The version who stayed up late adjusting his pitches, editing his slides, pressing his suits before big meetings while he called her his lucky charm. That woman had been hopeful, loyal, maybe even naive. Vanessa didn't judge her. She thanked her. Some days she reread old notes, receipts, and memories, physical reminders of years spent building something that was never fully hers, even if it had her name in fine print. But now the silence wasn't sharp. It was healing. Her phone buzzed with messages from new mentees, young women entering the business world, some eager, some afraid. She had agreed to a mentorship program quietly, without press releases or cameras. The first girl who showed up had shaking hands and a voice that kept breaking, telling Vanessa, "Everyone says you're unshakable." Vanessa had smiled. "That's because no one sees the parts of me that broke first." She didn't offer long speeches. She listened. She corrected with patience. She taught with calm hands. Sometimes her advice was simply a look, a soft nod, a knowing glance, a pause that said, "I've been where you are. You're not alone." Word spread quietly. More women came, not just for career advice, but for strength, for a kind of clarity that only someone who'd been burned and still stood tall could offer. One evening, after a panel discussion, a reporter asked, "Do you ever regret how things ended with Ethan Blake?" Vanessa sipped her water, gave a measured smile, and said, "I don't regret letting go of something that already left me long before I let it go." It became a quote that circled quietly through networks and inboxes. She never meant for it to go viral. But truth, she learned, had a way of echoing when spoken without bitterness. She was invited to events now, not as someone's wife, but as herself. Contracts came in her name, awards with her initials, photos that captured her mid-laugh, not mid-shadow. Still, in the quiet corners of her apartment, there were reminders. An old watch Ethan gave her, a photo album she couldn't bring herself to throw away, the outline of his handwriting on a forgotten recipe card in the kitchen drawer. She didn't hate him. She pitied him. Because Ethan had traded loyalty for attention, permanence for thrill. And when the applause died, he had nothing left but silence he had never learned to sit with. Vanessa, on the other hand, was learning how to live in it. To measure a life not by how loudly it had been loved, but by how bravely it had survived. And in that silence, she wasn't empty. She was finally whole. The conference hall buzzed with soft chatter, the hum of anticipation rising as Vanessa Blake took her seat on stage. The backdrop bore her name in elegant font beneath the event's title, "Women in Power, Quiet Strength, Lasting Impact." She wore a tailored ivory blazer, her expression composed, eyes focused, not on the crowd, but on the young speaker to her right, answering a question about resilience with hopeful, trembling clarity. When it was Vanessa's turn to speak, the room leaned in. Her voice, measured and warm, carried through the hall without strain. She spoke of silent endurance, of rebuilding, of not needing to destroy someone to prove you've risen above them. Her words weren't sharp. They were steady. They landed with weight. From the back row, Ethan sat with his hands knotted in his lap, his posture too small for the man he once was. His hair had grown out, his suit hung loosely on his thinner frame, and his eyes darted with a restlessness he couldn't hide. He hadn't been invited, but he had come anyway. Something inside him needed to hear her, really hear her, without power between them. Just truth. At the end of the panel, as people stood for applause and cameras flashed, Vanessa stepped down from the stage, exchanging handshakes and light smiles. She was walking toward the exit when she saw him. He stood alone, clutching a folded piece of paper, unsure if he would approach, but their eyes met, and in that moment, she stopped. "Vanessa," he said, his voice hoarse, "can I talk to you? Just a moment." She studied him quietly. There was no anger in her gaze, only a familiarity that had long since lost its warmth. He took a shallow breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I realized something too late as always. It wasn't just about the affair. It was that I kept treating you like a support beam when you were the whole foundation." The words hung between them, awkward and raw. "I never thanked you properly," he continued, "and I never apologized, not for what I did, but for how I saw you, for how I stopped seeing you. You didn't deserve that." People passed them in waves, some casting glances, others pretending not to listen, but neither of them moved. Vanessa's expression didn't change. She looked at him with the calm of someone who had already wept the tears, already bled the wound, and now stood above it. "Thank you," she said gently. He nodded, swallowing hard, as if expecting more. But she didn't say more. After a pause, he asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you forgive me?" Vanessa held his gaze, her voice soft but firm. "Forgiveness isn't always reconciliation, Ethan." He looked down, the truth landing with more finality than any legal document had. She stepped past him without drama, her heels echoing lightly on the polished floor. There was no anger in her walk, no victory in her posture, just peace. Earned peace. Ethan remained standing as she disappeared into the crowd, the piece of paper still in his hand, never opened. It wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the end of a chapter he no longer had the right to rewrite. The lobby smelled of fresh paint and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on the metallic letters mounted on the marble wall. The Blake Foundation. Beneath it, in smaller font, Vanessa L. Blake, founder and chairwoman. Vanessa stepped inside with quiet grace, wearing a white blouse tucked into tailored beige trousers, her heels clicking steadily as she passed through the space. Staff paused, some offering polite nods, others standing taller in her presence. She greeted them with warm eyes and a soft smile. Never cold, never detached. She wasn't the kind of leader who needed to raise her voice. Her presence spoke for itself. Her office sat on the top floor, walls lined with glass, her name etched modestly into the frosted glass door. The mission statement she had written months ago hung on the wall inside. Simple, but firm. Empower with clarity. Build with integrity. Lead with grace. She passed through her workspace slowly, pausing to watch a group of interns presenting a pitch to a senior analyst. The energy in the room was bright, fresh. It reminded her of the early days when everything had been uncertain but full of potential. This time, the vision was hers, entirely hers. A young employee named Maya approached her in the hallway. She was nervous, barely out of school, still learning the rhythm of boardrooms and expectations. "Miss Blake?" Maya asked softly. Vanessa turned, her voice even. "Yes?" Maya hesitated, then said, "How did you stay calm through all of it? I mean, the collapse, the rumors, your divorce, the media, everything?" Vanessa's eyes met hers gently. She thought for a moment, then answered, "Because I never lost myself." Maya blinked. "That's it?" "That's everything," Vanessa said. "People will try to take your time, your credit, even your name. But if you hold on to who you are, they can't truly take anything." Maya nodded, eyes wide with the kind of admiration that wasn't about fame. It was about strength. Vanessa continued on, walking toward the rooftop terrace where the view of the city stretched endlessly. She stood there for a while, letting the wind tug at her coat. She had walked through betrayal, faced loss without spectacle, and rebuilt without needing applause. No one had handed her a crown, but she had never needed one. She was not the empire's widow. She was the empire's architect. And now, with her name not just behind the scenes, but above the door, Vanessa Blake stood tall, not to show she had won, but to remind herself that survival wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of one that belonged entirely to her. And she wasn't writing it in someone else's shadow anymore. She was the light.